Hello everyone. I'm delighted to have you back in the third round of PCB's webinars. My name is Suzana Ayeti, the PCB's organizer for this session. As you might know, from now on, every Friday you will get to hear interesting topics on AGC portfolio and get a chance to earn free CPD credits. Today we'll be discussing about the new long-awaited standard ISO 45001. To learn more about it is joining us PCB's certified trainer and managing director of Smart ISO Systems and Smart Monitoring, Mr. David Smart. Feel free to write your questions and comments in the question box in the right-hand control panel, and Mr. Smart will answer to them accordingly. Moreover, if you want to participate directly in the discussion with Mr. Smart, you can also raise your hand, and then we will unmute your microphone and you can make your questions directly to him. Please, Mr. Smart, you may start the presentation.
Thank you very much, Susanna, and welcome everybody, wherever you are. Now, we've got a lot to get through, so I'm just going to quickly move on and go through it. Now, first of all, I'd just like to talk a little to you about my own background. My ISO experience goes back to the days of 5750, the first quality management system, where I was lucky enough to be part of a large project team, putting in 5750 in two large manufacturing plants back in 1979. I registered as a consultant with PIRA after being made redundant twice in 3 years when I set up my consultancy practice as Smart Quality Systems. Credibility was a problem I had, so I joined a large American consultancy firm working on corporate projects throughout Europe for 3 years, which gave me exposure in Europe and also broader consultancy experience apart from quality. I then worked in North America for around 9 years on projects, this time mostly SMEs, broadening my experience even further by working on other standards. In 2008, I came back home and set up Smart Mentoring to complement my ISO skills. I feel often companies do not fully understand the benefits that ISO systems can bring to the business. They focus too much on the marketing side, badge up on the wall mentality, using them as bolt-on systems without looking at the bottom line savings that can be made by improvements in their internal processes by better resource utilization. This is a new standard which updates the 18001 from the 2007 version, and it's going to be now adopted as an international standard. There's the time frames. It's expected to be published in Q4 of 2016. As you can see from the drawing, the final draft information standard, the FDIS, is due to be published for comment on March 2016. Once these comments have been voted on with a majority, then it will be available as a final standard for using. The structure and content, the working draft of the future of 45,000 occupational health and safety was produced in an effort to find consensus among the members of the US Technical Advisory Group in respect of the USA's position on important technical issues. What requirements should the standard include, and what information should be presented in Annex S as guidance was discussed. The new standard's high-level structure, Annex SL, which had previously been ISO Guide 83, this standard will give the same common format for all new and revised ISO management standards, for example 9000, 14000, 27. It will be supplemented by other subclauses or sub-subclauses from the occupational health and safety area. Governance and compatibility. The proposed new 45,000 standard will support new areas of management systems to ensure better compatibility and systems governance, making the implementation with the organization much smoother. The final published standard will allow any organization wishing to establish and implement the International Health and Safety Management System to reduce or minimize risks to personnel and other relevant parties, maintain and constantly improve their health and safety performance, and keep their operations in line with their stated health and safety policies against the requirements of the standard. The CD 45001 places more emphasis on risk management and ongoing assessment of risks and opportunities to prevent or reduce undesired effects. There is a strengthening of the requirement to demonstrate and understand compliance status at all times. for example, with legal and other requirements. There are specific subsections and requirements for contractors and procurement, clarifying and expanded requirements of OHAS 18001. Also, specific requirement on outsourcing operations. And I'll quote from the proposed standard: the organisation shall ensure that outsourced processes affecting its occupational health and safety management system are controlled. There are enhanced requirements on the use of performance indicators to monitor performance. That's under 9.1, monitor, measurement, analysis and evaluation, and tracking the OH&S performance, including status and trends in monitor and measurement results. That's under management review, subparagraph C. Now this is a new clause. The intent of 4.1 is to provide high-level conceptual understanding of the important issues that can affect either positively or negatively the way the organisation manages its responsibilities in relation to the OH&S management system for persons working under its control. The issues of interest are those that affect the organisation's ability to achieve the intended outcome, including the objectives it sets for its OH&S management system, which include meeting its OH&S policy commitments. Examples on the issues are external issues, are cultural, social, political, legal, financial, technological, economic and natural surroundings of market competition, whether that's international, national, local or regional. The internal characteristics such as governance, the structure of the organisation, the roles and accountabilities, and also the organisation's culture. The guidance given adds a comment that the results of the context review should be used to assist the organisation in understanding and determining the scope of its OH&S management system, determine its risks and opportunities, developing or enhancing its OH&S policy setting, its OH&S objectives, and determining the effectiveness of its approach to maintaining compliance with applicable legal requirements and other requirements to which the organisation subscribes. Again, another new clause which is common across all the standards now. Interested parties. The organisation has to determine interested parties that are relevant to its OH&S management system, and then the relevant requirements of those interested parties. However, there is no expectation that the organisation shall comply with all of those relevant requirements. And it adds a statement, and which of these become applicable legal and other requirements to which the organisation subscribes. Referring to the guidance given in Annex C, we have the explanation. The interested party needs and expectations are not necessarily compliant requirements of the organisation. It is important to distinguish between these needs and expectations, which will lead to mandatory requirements, laws, regulations, and voluntary commitments to interested parties to which the organisation voluntarily subscribes. Needs and expectations from interested parties only become obligatory requirements for the organisation if the organisation chooses to adopt them. Sorry, I jumped a slide there. Again, a new clause, leadership. Section 5 dedicates itself to leadership. This section is divided into 3 subsections: leadership, commitment, policy, organisation, roles, responsibilities, accountabilities and authorities. Although some of Section 5 will seem familiar to users of OHAS 18001, there are significant new and enhanced requirements. The clause calls for the organisation's top management to demonstrate their involvement and engagement with the OH&S management system through direct participation. For example, taking OH&S performance into account in strategic planning, communicating the importance of effective OH&S management, of conforming to the OH&S management system requirements, directing and supporting persons to contribute to the effectiveness of the OH&S management system for all functions, promoting and leading organisation culture with regard to OH&S management system, Top management shall identify one or more members to be accountable for the OH&S policy and OH&S management system. Now there's a note that these are activities top management are required to carry out. They cannot delegate them to others. This is very important. Thus, top management must assume an active role in the system. The leaders must also ensure the integration of the system requirements into the management's business processes. Now, the revised requirements under this, and these requirements are documentation and records are largely transferred to section 7.5 with revisions. It's further divided in 3 parts: general, creating and updating, and control of documented information. The significant change is the use of the term documented information, not documents and records, as in the case for 18,001. Documented information includes processed information held, for example, on smartphones and tablets. Alignment with other management system standards. There's a movement towards integrated systems now to make cohesive systems and make them easier to manage. And you do not slavishly need to follow the structure and terminology, but it's useful to have a matrix in your system, cross-reference the terminology of the standard, i.e. glossary terms, and also showing where you've addressed each clause of the standard in your system. A coherent presentation. The standard is not intended as a model for documenting the policies, objectives and processes. However, it's a good practice to make a matrix showing the cross-references from the appropriate clause of the standard. Apart from anything else, it makes it easier for an auditor who is not familiar with the company's system to quickly find the information. There just is a common format, Annex SL, for all standards. This is a high-level structure and is going to be adopted by all future standards and has already been adopted with 27,000, 9,000 and 14,000. I will now go on to talk about the correlation matrix, where the old standard clauses fit into the new standard and also where the requirements have changed. Understanding the organisation and its environment. The organisation shall determine external and internal issues that are relevant to its purpose and that affect its ability to achieve the intended outcome of its H&S system. Such issues shall include health and safety conditions being affected by or capable of affecting the organisation. 4.3. Determine the scope of the health and safety system to achieve the intended outcomes, including enhancing its health and safety performance. The organisation shall establish, implement, maintain and continue to improve its system, including the processes needed and their interactions. That's usually where the problems arise. They usually work not too bad as individual processes, but it's the boundaries that you come across where somebody else picks it up that you get most problems with. The organisation shall consider the knowledge gained under 4.1 and 4.2 when establishing and maintaining the health and safety management system. 4.4. To achieve the intended outcomes, including enhancing the system's performance, the organisation will establish, implement, maintain and continue to improve its health and safety system, including the processes needed in their interaction in accordance with the requirements of this international standard. I basically said that in the previous slide. Again, improvement, 10.2. The organisation shall determine opportunities for improvement under 9.1, 9.2, 9.3 and implement the necessary action to achieve the intended outcomes for the system. Now we're on to leadership now. The first part of it is the health and safety policy, which anybody that's done 18,000 will have a pretty good idea about. Top management shall establish, implement and maintain a health and safety policy that is within the defined scope of its health and safety management system. Now I'm going to ad-lib a little bit here and say often people crib things off the internet. You must get a policy that fits you specifically, no one that you've just said that'll do. And again, qualifying it is appropriate to the purpose and context of the organisation, including the nature, scale and impact of its activity, products and services. Provides a framework for setting health and safety objectives. Includes a commitment for the protection of the environment, including the prevention of pollution and other specific commitments relevant to the context of the organisation. There's a note here as well which says it includes a commitment to fulfill its compliance and obligations, includes a commitment to continue and improve the system to enhance the performance. And the policy will be maintained as documented information and be communicated within the organisation and also be available to interested parties. Now, the first part of 611 is general. The organisation shall establish, implement and maintain the processes needed to meet the requirements in 611 to 614. When planning for the health and safety system, the organisation shall consider the issues referred to in 4.1, the requirements in 4.2, the scope of its system, and determine the risks and opportunities related to its health and safety hazards, compliance obligations, and other issues and requirements identified in 4.1, 4.2 that need to be addressed. To give assurance that the health and safety management system can achieve its intended outcomes. Prevent or reduce undesired effects, including the potential for external environment conditions that affect the organisation. Achieve continual improvement. And then within the scope of the system, the organisation shall turn potential emergency situations, including those that have an environmental impact. The organisation shall maintain documented information of its risks and opportunities that need to be addressed, and the processes needed to prevent that to the extent necessary to have confidence that they're carried out as planned. Hazard identification. Within the scope of the system, the organisation shall determine the hazards of its activities and products and services that they can control and those that it can influence, and their associated health and safety impacts, considering a life cycle perspective. When determining the hazards, the organisation shall take into account change, including planning for new developments and new or modified activities for the products and services, and also abnormal conditions and reasonably foreseeable emergency situations. I mean, in this country now, flooding is one of the biggest problems that we never had years ago. The organisation shall determine those hazards that have or can have a significant impact, significant hazards by using established criteria. The organisation shall communicate its significant health and safety hazards among the various levels and functions of the organisation. Again, the organisation will maintain documented information on its hazards and associated impacts, the criteria used to determine them. And again, significant health and safety hazards can result in risks and opportunities associated with either adverse health and safety impacts, which are the threats, or beneficial health and safety impacts, which are the opportunities. Sorry, I've done it again. 614, planning action. The organisation shall plan and take actions to address significant health and safety hazards, compliance obligations, risks and opportunities. And then there's how to integrate and implement the actions and evaluate the effectiveness of the actions. When planning these actions, the organisation shall consider its technological options, its financial, operation and business requirements. Changes to planning. Procedures do not remain static, written once then forgotten about. The procedures should be periodically reviewed, and when improved methods of doing the job are found, then the procedure should be amended to reflect this. Often the organisation, people change procedures unofficially, for example, by the supervisor issuing verbal instructions, or the operator sliding into bad habits, or indeed finding a new way of doing the job. Another way is through changes in technology, where the technology changes the working practices, for example, from a manual to an automated method. Changes have to be done in a controlled manner, not ad hoc, without trials and agreement that indeed there is an improvement to the current method of doing things. Planning is all too often not thought about deeply enough. People tend to rush into things and do them by trial and error. This is not a good way of going about things. I always try to remember the saying, proper planning prevents poor performance. Understanding the needs and expectations of interested parties. The interested parties are relevant to the system. The relevant needs and expectations, the requirements of these interested parties. Which of these needs and expectations become its compliance obligations? And then the next one, 613, determine of the legal and other requirements. Determine and have access to compliance obligations relating to health and safety hazards. Determine how the compliance obligations apply to the organisation. Take these compliance obligations into account when establishing, implementing, maintaining and continuously improving the system. Again, the organisation shall maintain documented information on its compliance obligations. Compliance obligations can result in risk or opportunities to the organisation. 622, planning to achieve health and safety objectives. When planning how to achieve its health and safety objectives, the organisation will determine what will be done, what resources will be required, who will be responsible, when it will be completed, how the results will be evaluated, including indicators for monitoring progress towards achievement of its measurable objectives. The organisation shall consider how actions to achieve its objectives can be integrated into the organisation's business processes. 6.1, legal and other requirements. You need to determine, have access to the compliance obligations related to health and safety hazards, determine how these compliance obligations apply to the organisation, take these compliance obligations into account when establishing, implementing, maintaining, continuously improving. And again, the organisation shall maintain documented information on its compliance obligations. Leadership and commitment. Top management must demonstrate leadership and commitment with respect to the system by taking accountability for the effectiveness of the system, ensuring the policy and objectives are established and are compatible with the strategic direction and the context of the organisation, ensuring the integration of the system requirements are taken into account, are done within the business's processes, ensuring that the resources needed for the system are available, communicating the importance of the effectiveness of the system and confirming the system requirements, ensuring that the system achieves its intended outcomes, directed and supporting persons to contribute to the effectiveness of the system, promoting continual improvement, and supporting other relevant management roles to demonstrate their leadership as it applies to their areas of responsibility. The reference to the business in this standard can be interpreted broadly to mean these activities that are core to the purposes of the organisation's existence. Organisation roles, responsibilities and authority. Top management will ensure the responsibility and authorities for relevant roles are assigned and communicated. Top management will assign responsibility for ensuring that the health and safety system conforms to the requirements of the standard and reporting on the performance of the system, including the performance to top management. And again, the resources they need to be determined and the necessary resources must be made available to maintain and implement the system. Now we're on to competence. You need to determine the necessary competence of persons doing work under its control that affects its health and safety performance and its ability to fulfill its compliance obligations. Ensure that these persons are competent on the basis of appropriate education, training and experience. Determine training needs associated with the health and safety hazards and its health and safety management system. Take action to acquire the necessary competence and evaluate the effectiveness of the actions taken. Applicable actions can include, for example, the provision of training to, the mentoring of, or the reassignment of currently employed persons, or the hiring or contracting of competent persons. And again, the organisation shall retain documented information as evidence of this competence. Now, for anybody that's familiar with it before, training, competence and awareness was all split. It was all under one clause before. Now it's been split up a bit and amended a bit. Awareness. The organisation shall ensure that persons doing work under the organisation's control are aware of the health and safety policy, the hazards, related or potential hazards associated with the work that's been done, their contribution to the effectiveness of the system, including the benefits of enhanced H&S performance, implications of not conforming to the system's requirements, including not fulfilling the organisation's compliance obligations. Communication. Implement, maintain needed internal and external communications, including on what to communicate, when to communicate, with whom to communicate, and how to communicate. When establishing its communication process, the organisation shall take into account its compliance obligations, ensure that H&S information communicated is consistent with information generated within the system and is reliable. The organisation shall respond to relevant communications on its system, and again, you'll maintain documented information on it. Participation in communication, internal communication, internally communicate information relevant to the system among the various levels and functions of the organisation, including changes to it, and ensure that the communication process enables persons doing work under the organisation and co contributes to continual improvement. And then external communication, the organisation shall externally communicate information relevant to the system as established by the organisation's processes and as required by its compliance obligations. Again, documented information, I basically covered that. There's two areas here. There's creating and updating, and then there's control of documented information. I'm just going to quickly skip through these next two slides because there's no any real changes apart from the fact that we're moving away from paper-based systems now to that's where the basic changes have come in. So I'm going to slip through that one. I'm just going to move on to operations. Organisation will implement, control and maintain its processes needed to implement the actions under 6.1 and 6.2 by establishing operating criteria for its processes and implementing control of the process in accordance with its operating procedure. Again, controls can include engineering controls and procedures. Controls can be implemented following a hierarchy, for example, elimination, substitution, administration, and can be used individually or in combination. Now, management of change. The changes need to be planned and review the consequences of unintended changes, taking action to mitigate any adverse effects as necessary. Now again, outsourcing. The organisation shall ensure that outsourced processes are controlled and influenced. You cannot just get away with now filling out, sending a questionnaire out to somebody you're going to outsource a service to, or get them to do some work, and get them to fill it out and then store it away. It's your responsibility to make sure that whoever you employ knows what is required by your organisation. The type and extent of control or influence to be applied to the processes shall be defined within the system, consistent with a life cycle perspective. The organisation shall establish controls to ensure the system is addressed in the design and development processes for a product and service, considering each life cycle change. That's a big area now that wasn't so well spelled out before. And then 8.4, procurement and contractors. You must communicate the health and safety requirements to external providers, including contractors. Consider the need to provide information about potential significant hazards associated with the transportation or delivery, use, and end of life, treatment, and final disposal of the products and services. The organisation, again, documented information for it. Now again, emergency preparedness and response. Often I'll see procedures in place, but testing them and understanding what's involved is often basically ignored. They need to be established. It shall prepare to respond by planning actions to prevent or mitigate adverse hazards from emergency situations, respond to actual emergencies, take action to prevent or mitigate the consequences of emergency situation appropriate to the magnitude of the emergency and the potential consequences. Periodically test the planned response actions and periodically review and revise the processes and planned response actions, in particular after the occurrence of emergency situations or tests. Provide relevant information and training related to emergency preparedness and response to relevant interested parties, including persons working under its control, and again, all to be documented. Monitor and measurement. An organisation shall determine what needs to be monitored and measured, the methods of monitoring, measuring, analysis and evaluation to ensure the results are valid, the criteria against which that will be evaluated, and along with appropriate indicators when monitoring and measuring shall be performed. When the results from monitoring and measurement will be analysed and evaluated, the organisation will ensure that it uses calibrated equipment or verified monitor and measurement is maintained. The equipment is maintained and calibrated. The organisation will evaluate its environmental performance and the effectiveness of the health and safety management system. Don't get confused with ISO 14001. We're not talking about flora and fauna here. We're talking about adverse effects affecting people. For instance, if you've got a smoke chimney and you're near a town, then the smoke is polluting the community. That's what they're talking about, even though it'll probably kill off the flora and fauna as well. But it's important to understand that the differences between them. The organisation will communicate the performance of the system both internally and externally, identified in its communication processes. And again, you'll maintain the information. Now, not long ago, evaluation of compliance. Determine the frequency that compliance will be evaluated, evaluate compliance and the actions taken if needed, and maintain the knowledge and understanding of its compliance status, and again, documented. While there's no direct correlation here, the requirements still exist, but under a different clause, which we'll see in the following slides. Preventive action has been removed from standards as intended that corrective action will prevent recurrence. Sometimes corrective actions are obvious and do not require a lot of investigation or effort to solve. This was the idea of corrective actions in the old standard. Preventive action was where time and resources were required to find the root cause. Often just the symptoms were treated and the problem recurred again further down the line. I often found when auditing that confusion existed between two procedures, as the users never really fully understood what the preventive action procedure was attempting to do. Non-conformity in corrective actions. The organisation will determine opportunities for improvement. Again, that was in 18,000. Again, when non-conformity occurs, there's nothing much in there that you shouldn't know. It's just taking the basic old clause and putting it under a new area. So I'm not going to deal too much on that. There's nothing much on that about improvement. It's just talking about non-conformity and corrective actions, which most of you will know anyway, so I won't bore you with that. Again, this one is control of documented information, which I covered in the first part of my presentation. So just basically same as under 18,000, distribution, access, retrieval and use, storage and preservation, including preservation eligibility, version control and the retention disposition, nothing much in there. If you've had any experience at all, you'll probably know. Internal audit objectives, alternate planned intervals, and conforms to the organisation own requirements, the system, and also the requirements this international standards, and is effectively implemented and maintained. And again, the organisation will define audit criteria and the scope of each audit, select auditors and conduct audits to ensure objectivity and impartiality of the audit process, and ensure the results are reported to top management. And again, that will all need to be documented, but again, that basically was on the 18,001. Thank you very much for your time. There's my email address. And finally, various ways of getting in contact with me. So I'd like to say thank you very much for your patience. I'm sorry if it was a bit dry. Hopefully I haven't hurried through it too quickly, but I wanted to leave time at the end for any questions you might have. So I'm going to quickly move on to questions now and see if I can answer them for you. Thank you for your time.
Mr. Smart, thank you for this presentation. We have some questions for you. The first question is, do I need to use a consultant in this process of translation?
No. I would actually suggest a very alternative. If you can do something yourself, then you're liable to understand what it's about. If you get a consultant in, especially if you get them to write your procedures, then there's always a feeling that you've had very little input into it, and then you're always open to the suggestion. That system's not to do with us. That consultant guy came in and did it. So no, there's no need. And if you want a little, it depends how much help you want. But I certainly would suggest that you write and implement your own procedures. And that starts off with the biggest problem, which is taking time to understand what the standard's about. But you can easily get familiarization seminars or read about on the internet to familiarize yourself with what's involved. Or if you send me some emails, I'll send you some basic checklists and things like that if you want. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The other question is, according to your experience, what are the most common problems that may come up during the transition process?
Well, the biggest problem I find is that top-level management, and no matter what system you've got, it tends to be what I've said in the first place, a bolt-on system. And especially with a health and safety system, management cannot see that you can, I'm generalizing here, see that you can actually make bottom line savings. They think it's a cost of doing business. And often in commercial organizations, when the pressure comes on, then health and safety is pushed to one side, and health and safety training is pushed to one side to the exclusion of profits, or to get better profits. So the whole idea of the IXSL and the introduction of 4.1 and 4.2 is to get the top management show their commitment and lead by example and demonstrate that health and safety matters in a company. And if there's a low accident rate, then people feel safe in the environment. And if they also feel that they can draw the attention to management of better improved processes, more safer ways of handling their products or whatever, and if there's less absenteeism, obviously there's more productivity, that type of thing. So that's where the big benefits come in any system. That, as I've said already, there's too much of this badge up on the wall stuff and just meeting the minimum compliance levels that you've got to, and top management will say, well, we'll do it, we have to do it, but I can't see the point in this, and it's an overhead that we could be doing without. That's the sort of general attitude.
Thank you. The other question is, since the new ISO 45001 is coming out, should we still take into the consideration the OSHA's 80001 certification, or just wait for the new standard?
Now, you have, just the same way as you have in any of the standards, there's a transition period which will last 3 years. If you choose to, you can be certified by your certification body. When it comes out, let's assume it comes out in Q4 of 2016. Well, you'll have up to Q4 or 16 plus 3, 19, before you have to update. A lot of the time when people ask you for certification, as long as you've got something that's there, they'll be happy with it. My own view is changeover. It's now an internationally recognized standard, so they might actually ask you for it, but the changeover period, you've got 3 years to do it, and you should take your time doing it. But if somebody starts asking you for it in a contract, if you've got 45,000 rather than 18,001, then that's probably. And anyway, I believe that it's an improvement in itself, this new standard, and adopting the clauses 4.1 and the changes and no keeping paper systems and having computerized systems now for collecting and analysing data, there's big opportunities in there. Thank you.
Thank you. And the last question is, what is your general advice for the organizations regarding the new standard?
Well, as I said earlier about consultancy, it's about understanding what the requirements are and not getting dragged kicking and screaming into the new situation. People should see the benefits in it and welcome it as an opportunity, not see it as a threat, as an extra burden on managing the business, which a lot of the time doing paperwork, and people generally hate doing paperwork, and anything that can automate that process, or data capture and analysis and collation and that side of stuff, and generally investing in training to show the positive side of what a health and safety system, or indeed integrating it. That's a big thing now. Under Annex SL, you've got a common format. So, for instance, we'll say information security. More and more people are concerned about protecting their information. I mean, just as a simple example, I did an audit on a company, and they were getting their quotes and that in, and I said about the contracts that should be publicly available, and they had a fit. And I tried to point out to them, well, if you're that concerned about it, you should tighten up on your contracts coming in by email, because these are not secure lines that anybody can steal that information either on the outgoing side or the incoming side. So integrated systems, again, instead of having, and again, that since Enron and things like that, there's a more proliferation of standards now than ever there was, that people want organizations to be externally assessed to see that they're complying with what they're wanting, rather than relying on people just turning around and saying, I mean, it used to be before, especially in quality management systems, working in compliance with and not being accredited. Or there's a lot of organisations offering unaccredited registration as well, and that's no worth the paper it's written on. So back to what I'm saying, it's about looking at your system like a balance sheet and seeing it as on the asset side of the balance sheet for the company rather on the liability side.
Thank you, Mr. Smart. I would like to thank you once again for this presentation. I would also like to thank all the attendees for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed this webinar. We have received all of your questions, and because the time is limited, we will answer to your questions individually by email. Also, don't forget to check PCB's webinar schedule on our website, pcb.com, or our official social media network. See you next week, everyone.